All right, welcome back to another edition of the Garage Gym Experiment podcast. I have Chris Mosley back for the third time. He is the founder of Mutant Metals. We've had some good chats, have covered some good topics, some hot topics, and here we are again. Chris, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, it has been a couple years since we've last done a podcast. We've talked in
hmm
between, but I have not heard from you how your partnership with Rogue is going. Can you give us some up to date information on how it's going, and maybe just some high level, not numbers, but just like, are you happy with it?
Yeah. I mean, Rogue so far has been, that whole situation's been real good. I mean, it's been beneficial to us. They've followed through with pretty much everything they've said that they were going to do. So, we're doing obviously the dip attachment, which we've been doing now for a couple years. So that's been going pretty smooth. It's helped us too because we could buy the frames from Rogue and do them up a little fancier. Helps us on some like fabrication time and stuff. So that's been helpful. Obviously, you know, depending on who follows us or not, but Rogue now does the our ARC product a little different than you know how we do it, which I have one of those sitting right here. So that's the new arc with the included landmine hole, and you can see a little Darko emblem there. We borrowed the plastic idea from him. A little different construction, but so we got that going, and all the handles too. So Rogue's been doing, you know, bunch of different handle options. They got the aluminum handles now, the steel handles, stainless handles, bunch of different lengths. Hopefully, we'll go into different diameters at some point. The aluminum's been real cool, lowering the weight of that attachment down. But yeah, it's been real interesting working with somebody of their size and their capability. It really opens up a lot of possibilities to do things in the future, which I hope we keep expanding that relationship too.
Yeah, what kind of employees from Rogue do you deal with?
Um, I mean, I'm probably a weird case, you know, because of how our relationship started, but um, I talked to Bill quite a bit, which is the owner of Rogue. Um, his secondhand guy, Amic, um, and a couple other people at Rogue that uh, handle like purchasing and stuff like that. But I don't deal with a ton of people there for how busy I imagine Bill is. He's made himself pretty available for as much as I imagine he can. Um, but that it's been pretty good as far as communicating with them on stuff. So um, yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. There's
Cool.
nothing too crazy going on there.
Um, can you tell me about? I'd be curious to hear about the arc handle, like the backstory behind where that came from. I know you teased at Home Gym Con in 2024, but I never heard where that idea came from, and then also um, backstory on like how it you morphed in with Darko. Was it his idea? Was it your idea? Was it someone from Rogue's idea? I'd be curious to hear how that ultimately came together as well.
So the whole arc thing, everybody calls it the arc, but arc is actually supposed to be part of a series of products,
Okay.
and it's an acronym. It's articulate, rotate, and connect is what ARC stands for. But I think you know it just kind of took off as that name, and everybody just knows it as the arc because maybe the shape of it is kind of a shape of an arc,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that didn't help much, but it's really the arc pull down. It's the pull down attachment of
Okay.
that series.
Arc pull down. Yeah.
Um, and the whole idea really was because the dip attachment is so expensive, and you have the handles that could be used in other places. You know, what's another way that we could get more use out of the handles and more use out of the attachment as a whole, to have more value to it, to have more perceived value to the purchase. Because, obviously Rogue does, and we make everything in America, and that's tough to do and it's expensive to do. So this is kind of an engineering solution to dealing with high cost of doing that.
Cool. And then what about the Darko collab?
The That came from actually talking a bit. We went through like the product design, and Rogue wanted to change it a little bit so it's not so reliant on the weld structure of the piece. Where mine is just a couple tubes welded onto a bracket, which is fine when you have people that are welding things, but when you go into like robotic welding, and you know they while robots are perfectly consistent, maybe jigging it up or something isn't perfectly consistent, and a weld could be shifted a little bit or whatever. So I think they like to rely less on things like welds as connection solutions, um, and more as kind of like glue to put things together. Um, so they wanted to do a redesign on it from that area, and from you know being able to protect the piece too, because I didn't get any patents or patent pending on it or anything. I actually didn't think it was that big of a deal of a product, to be honest with you. Um, and I brought it to Home Gym Con, and I wasn't going to even enter it in the contest that you were doing for like an innovative product or whatever, because I just it was something I threw together last minute, did some testing on, and just wanted to kind of get feedback on it. But through that redesign, we realized that if we were going to add the bulk to it, it gave us the opportunity to add a landmine hole to it, um, which I think originally was my idea for the landmine hole. And then I think it was actually Bill's idea to loop Darko in on like the plastic, because we're going to have to do something similar in construction to what he does with his longy and shorty bars. So that's kind of how that all came about. It was just going through that process, and one thing led to another, and we came up with that. So,
And all
and then
that's
the like the aluminum handles, that came out of the same thing, because the bulk of the new arc, it's heavy. So if you add heavy steel or solid stainless steel handles to it, it really increases the weight of that attachment even more, to something that was already heavy. You have the dip attachment handles are like 9 pounds a piece, and the original arc is only a couple pounds. So it was still a 20-pound plus attachment. But once you go to the new style, I think the bracket itself weighs close to 10 pounds. So now you're talking a 30-pound attachment, which causes obvious problems. So we looked into doing aluminum and hollow, which they're going to be doing hollow also. The 15-inch and the 18-inch hollow handles, I believe they're going to do them in steel and stainless, which will allow you to get a metal like stainless without the weight. So, and that you will have basically the same strength as the solid ones, but with a lot lighter weight. So you could have that full length arc pull down, and even possibly applying it to the dip attachment. You would drop the total weight of the dip attachment from like 32 pounds, I think, with the handles. It would take it down to, it's just a guess, it's probably something like maybe 10 pounds off of that.
yeah, so it's like
So
22 pounds, 20
yeah, so
pounds.
you'll have a pretty light attachment, that would make the most sense to me to offer the hollow handles with it also. I don't know what their plans are with that, but I would assume that's the direction probably going to be going. I don't know if that would mean that they get rid of the solid ones or not, but I'm not sure about that, but um, I think it just makes sense as far as putting everything together, keeping all the weight low, getting the most use and value out of the dip attachment and out of the arc pull down, and then hopefully more arc series products.
Cool. Well, I mean, from my end, it looks like all of this stuff's releasing pretty fast, faster than most other companies are pumping other stuff out. Has that been your experience with Rogue recently? It seemed like because it does seem
Rogue,
like Rogue, like they went through a period where it was slower, and everyone commented on how they haven't released anything, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. Um, so I'd be curious to hear how what your
yeah,
take
I
is.
think I think it going in waves like that is kind of just the natural progression of how companies work. I don't think it's like a planned thing. I think it's just, you know, it's really hard to make things from scratch if you're doing something that's like you're doing something that's innovative or new, especially that no one else does. Is you have to start with the design process, and then through the design process you're trying to figure out how you're going to make this thing, and then all the constraints that you have based off of what the manufacturing capabilities are, and my constraints are going to be different than their constraints and vice versa. Things that I would never do because they would just be too difficult because I don't have access to the machinery or whatever, isn't a big deal to them. And maybe things that I would do because I have the luxury of doing them manually, um, might actually be a little easier, and it's not as big of a constraint. It's usually more the other way around. Rogue could usually do a lot more than I can, um, but when you start putting all those pieces together, a lot of times you'll hit roadblocks on products, and you might be 75% of the way through and realize this isn't going to work the way that we just spent 2 months trying to figure out how to piece this thing together, and then all of a sudden you're starting over. And Rogue has so many products in their catalog that they produce, um, that I think it's just a lot to you know you have to build a system around every single one of those products. With Rogue doing their, I think one of the big things that slowed them down was probably getting into the cross trainers because of the infrastructure they had to put in to do, what everybody's coming out with now, the racks with the weight stacks in them and cables. Um, that's a complicated project, and honestly, the timeline they did it in, I don't even understand how they did that. Um, and it's not just like me brown nose and Rogue. That's hard to do. Like you're talking essentially building what I think is probably a whole new wing of their business just to release one product. And you factor that into other stuff that they're working on. Maybe you need multiple engineers on that product, and you need all hands on deck on that one specific product, and then other ones you need one engineer, and you could send it to machining and do basic concepts and work it out in 2 days maybe, and other stuff takes months. I think it's just because they do so much stuff that you know you can't always do that and keep that pace all the time. um, I will say though that they move about as fast as they can move. So once they decide that they're going to do something, it's essentially a military operation from there. It's breaking everything down, figuring out what needs done, and not wasting time doing it. And that's, to me, that's their biggest advantage in the market, because when you're looking at competitors that are importing products, which is basically everybody else, a lot of companies just kind of threw their hands up in the air with trying to make stuff in the US because of how expensive it is. And not just expensive, but the skill gap that we have in the US is wild. There's not a lot of people that know how to make things anymore. Um, Especially if it's completely new unique things that aren't off the shelf components. But you know so I think that's what you're seeing, is you're just seeing the ebb and flow of a company that's working through trying to keep up with an industry that has a major advantage over them when it comes to pricing. And they're trying to make that up via speed and protecting intellectual property, and which is also, I think they get a bad rap for being so aggressive when it comes to protecting like IP, like any of their patents or design patents. But what I've learned even before working with Rogue, is that, you know, the only real thing a United States company has right now is the ability to protect their intellectual property. Because if you can't, well, let me backtrack a little bit. The way that this normally works is in the U.S., if you get a patent, well, you start with patent pending usually. So you pay to get patent pending, which does nothing but gives you a placeholder. Once you have that placeholder, you have a year to work out the product to, if you got to make changes or whatever, and then you have to file for a utility patent or design patent, whatever way you're going to go about it. And then that patent's good for a certain amount of time. A lot of people make the mistake in that they think when you have the patent, that automatically protects you. But you could see all over the industry, there's products that are patent pending or they have patents and there's still copies out there, especially when you start looking at like direct to consumer from China sites like Alibaba or, their Wish or whatever. That makes it even more complicated, and they're really good at copying things fast. So the only thing you really have is protecting that IP, and it's up to you as the patent holder to protect that IP. So if you let 10 copies go out and you don't send letters, you don't start a costly process of trying to sue somebody, which you're talking minimum $50,000 usually to sue somebody for patent infringement with no guarantee that you're going to win. If you don't do that, you just invalidated your patent. So you might have spent $20,000 to get a patent, and you didn't spend another $50 to $100,000 defending it. You just invalidated your own patent because you're essentially giving in the eyes of the law, you're giving permission for people to use your ideas because you're not trying to safeguard them. And I think that's a major issue, not just in U.S. patent law, but in international patent law. It's really expensive to get patents. It's really expensive to maintain them. It's really expensive to defend them. And if you don't, you lose, as an American company, you lose your only edge now that you have, because I think we used to be able, and still companies do, like me and Dean and some other guys that do some specialty stuff, or we do special coatings or clear grinds and stuff that you can't easily automate. That helps small guys get off the ground, but you can't scale that. Scaling stuff like that's really difficult. It adds a lot of steps and a lot of complexity and a lot more things that could go wrong. So then you go to the quality argument. Well, is someone like Rogue, do they have a big quality gap over someone like Rep? And 10 years ago, maybe there was a huge quality gap between those two style of companies. But now, because the U.S., all these companies in the U.S. have basically sold out their production to China, we don't have the infrastructure that trains people how to do things anymore. And we have this massive skill gap. And on top of that, you can't really keep people in a manufacturing setting. Any manufacturing setting I've ever worked in, people come and go very quickly. And all of those things make it really difficult to make things here. But my point is that gap, that quality gap that used to exist that American companies could lean on because they could just produce a better product, that gap is shrinking. And in some instances, it's totally gone and reversed, where China's making a better quality product because the base materials are cheaper. They can make more mistakes figuring things out. They could take greater risk because they have this separation between the people that manufacture the thing and the people that sell the thing and the people that advertise the thing. There's all these different layers. So they have litigation protection too as a manufacturer in China because you're not going over to China to sue somebody. Some people do, some large companies are able to pull that stuff off, but you're talking things that take years and possibly millions of dollars to defend something. And we're making fitness equipment. Like, how much money do you expect to make off of a piece of fitness equipment? If it's benches and racks, you might make a lot of money, because everybody's buying benches and racks. But, you know, something like a dip attachment and these handles and all that, it's not, I don't think it's the lottery that people think it is, that you get into making a product and you license it to somebody or whatever. I think a lot of people just think you could just, walk away at that point because you got a product in with and this is no shade at Rogue, because I'll tell you right now, I've talked to probably 30 different companies about doing different products and stuff. And Rogue is by far offered the highest margin on any offer I've ever gotten on anything, including people that import. So, um, that's not a dig on them. It's just a reality of the situation. Um, but they still sell decent because Rogue has, Rogue's Rogue, and they have a big store, and um, yet they still move. They're still enabling me to do stuff that I wouldn't be able to do um, otherwise. I would never be able to get, like I see you have that dip attachment back there with the black handles. Um, you know, those are in tons of gyms that they wouldn't otherwise be in because people either couldn't afford it, didn't want to wait for it, um, couldn't get in to buy it. All kinds of reasons, and they allow me to get my ideas from my head to the most amount of people as possible as quickly as possible. And that's the other advantage that Rogue has, is that they're not coming up with a design, sending it to a factory in China, waiting for them to figure out the manufacturing process, waiting for them to get the stock built up, and then waiting for a container to come over and drop it off and hope nothing goes wrong in that process. Um, that's why when I see pre-orders for products that are made in China, that scares the shit out of me, because like, what do you do if you pre-order a product and you sell 1,000 of them, and then all of a sudden that container gets hung up in a bay somewhere because of a tariff or because of a new trade law, and all of a sudden, say that company can't afford to pay that tariff or cover the cost of whatever happened. And, I'm surprised there's not more stories of pre-orders that just go terribly wrong, especially with the current way the market swings with, you know, administration changes and laws and whatever. Um, but, Rogue can, wow, if they decide that something's important, they could jump on it, and they could go from concept to a physical product in a day, versus months. Um, and do all their own internal testing and um, get it out, get it available and out the door. So um, that's what they do well, which is what they have to do well, is speed, which I think that's why you're seeing kind of a pickup of like these smaller items, because that, I think they want to target the home gym space some more, especially with how, like, the state of CrossFit and um, just kind of the landscape period. I think commercial gyms are kind of consolidating into these more like super high end like fitness facilities, and a lot more people are putting in home gyms. That home gyms are starting to be as common as having that extra bathroom, or someone that has an office probably has a home gym. A lot of those a lot of those things that are important to those people align. So I think it's smart to target the space. I targeted the space for those reasons, and also because I knew I would never be able to scale a manufacturing business to supply a commercial outfit. Like, I get one commercial order, I'm busy for 4 months, can't do nothing else.
Hmm.
So, versus doing a lot of small accessories, which is partly by accident, mostly by accident in the beginning, which I mean, and but it just made the most sense to keep going down that road. Um, but and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is, you know, I'm coming up into a transition in my business, and being involved in Rogue helps this a lot. I mean, it's really the only thing that's going to make it possible. And hopefully they run, a couple more products or something and want to expand the Mutant Metals catalog even further, because that would make this a lot easier. But um, a lot of people already know that, we just did a fundraiser um, with the whole club foot thing. My son was born with bilateral club foot, which is a super common birth defect where a kid is born with their feet extremely supinated, and it could happen in different varying degrees. His was really bad. So, and when you have really bad cases, um, they have, between a 30 and 50% relapse rate. So their feet could start pulling back in as they grow. Tendons and muscles and stuff don't grow at the same rate. And you get into problems. And that's kind of what we're dealing with now. So he's going to have to get pretty extensive surgery for a 7-year-old, which is going to really limit my time as far as physically making things. It's getting harder and harder to physically make things. I'm still running out of my basement. I had people that think that I bought some building or something and scaling. I'm not doing that. I don't know where that's coming from. Um, you know, Everything that's not being bought from Rogue and modified is being totally or not laser cut or whatever, is being totally made here, welded, finished. Powder coat's not done here. I use a custom bike shop for that. They do a really good job at a decent price, so I'd rather just keep giving them the business of doing that than trying to internalize that. But it's always been the idea to be more of a production company, making ideas and spreading the ideas versus being a manufacturing company. Um, my wife has health issues. My daughter has health issues. With the amount of time I spend in the shop, I'm probably going to start getting health issues if I don't start working out and quit being a fat ass and eating whatever I want whenever I want. So, I have to get some things in life together, and to do that, I got to step away a little bit. To be able to come out with new stuff, I got to step away a little bit. I've talked about a V2 snapback roller for 3 years now, and I haven't been able to work on it. We're too busy trying to get orders out the door, trying to reduce lead times, which never works because
Yeah.
it's not like I could just hire 2 people to come work in my house. You have to go rent a place. I got to be away from home. I'd probably be back and forth all the time, so I'd have to rent a local place, have to hire people, have to hope that all the things that come with hiring people in the U.S., like insurance and paying fair wages and all the other stuff that Chinese companies don't have to worry about as much. Um, and it's not feasible. It's not realistic to think that I'm going to scale a manufacturing company. It wasn't 3 years ago, and it's not now. And it's probably more so not feasible now than it ever was, even though I have some more resources from Rogue. Maybe I could run a building or something, but everything else that comes with it just isn't going to work. So, what you'll probably see from Mutant Metals is And you're already seeing it because I pulled the snapback rollers down. They're just marked as sold out, so they're not available to purchase. Same thing with the V1 Arc. They're not available anymore. The dip attachment right now isn't available. I'm still deciding whether or not we can do another run of the hybrid dip attachments. Um, I have, on top of everything that's going on, I have an employee that's likely leaving, and my only employee is likely leaving in a month or two. Could be sooner. I don't know. That's kind of up in the air. She has to move back home for certain reasons. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm going to basically focus on trying to get as much stuff out the door with taking as little orders in as possible. Um, and, leveraging what we get from Rogue to make that happen also. And make that transition to being more passive on the manufacturing side than we currently are. And then, the idea to be able to prototype things though effectively and to offer what I would like to be able to do for companies like Rogue, or if there's, you know, if there's items that Rogue isn't interested in, maybe working with other people. What I'd like to be able to do, and I've explained this before, is essentially set up a prototyping space that has a lot of the same equipment that these guys have. I'm just only going to have one of them, maybe. You know, it'd be nice to have a, a really capable CNC lathe and a mill and a laser, and even if they're just small versions, so I could replicate their manufacturing processes. Um, so I still do want to have a shop that's capable of like small production runs if necessary, or to do like we did with the dip attachment where we do some fancy stuff for a while to gain some attention to the product. I think that's been really effective. You don't really see a lot of people sharing the Rogue built ones because I think there's so many of them. It's like, here's my blue or red, dip attachment that now 3,000 people have. They want to show the clear grinds and the you know fancy colors and the finishes that we do. Um, and how it goes with their space or how it's been customized to their space. So I think that's been effective. So I still want to be able to do things like that. It's just I have to be able to do them in a way that's not going to interfere too much with taking care of what I have to take care of now, which is going to look like a big slowdown. I'm worried some people are going to think we're going out of business. Some people already said that we're just going to kind of put our hands up and sell to Rogue. And I don't even know if Rogue's interested in buying us, to be honest with you. So I don't even know that that's an option. Um, and really, there's nothing to buy yet. We don't, Rogue holds a lot of our intellectual property and stuff, which is stuff that they designed, which is really their intellectual property. They've helped me get some IP on some new products. And then I recently just got some IP myself on a product. Um, so that's the direction I'm going in, is trying to be more of a production company, trying to get these. I have like, I think I'm up to like 400 some different product ideas, and I keep a rolling notebook of different ideas and sketches. Um, and there's still tons of those that no one's came out with any kind of analog of, no version of, or people that have come out with versions of them, and I've been upset that I haven't been able to get them out there before they did. Um, and it's still cool seeing stuff made regardless, um, but yeah, that's kind of what's going on now.
Yeah, yeah, you're going through some stuff, trying to change the business. With this, I mean, with this, hopefully you can get some clients, right? Is that what you'd call them? Who are your ideal clients then?
I mean, obviously, the more we could continue doing stuff with Rogue, that's going to be the path of least resistance as far as scalability. and just having someone that's really capable of pulling off things that maybe other companies can't pull off. But you know, any North American based companies, Canadian companies, US companies that are building things here, and maybe doing things that are different than other people are doing. I've talked to quite a few people now. Hasn't really had anything that hasn't been anything that's stuck yet, but there's ideas floating around. I've been in contact with Havoc and Takeover. I think we want to do something together, but I don't know where we fit together yet. We just been kind of talking, discussing some ideas. They got their own stuff going on with trying to, flip it from being kabuki and everything that came with that. But yeah, I don't have a lot of specific companies in mind. It just kind of depends on what the idea is, what the product is, whether or not Rogue's interested in running it or not, and who's capable of doing it. And sticking with companies that have similar alignments to us. I there was a time where I really was just getting ready to kind of throw my hands up in the air and just go with, looking for an importer and doing what everybody else is doing as far as, shipping stuff overseas. And who knows? Maybe if what happened with Rogue didn't happen, maybe I would have went that direction, just because there's so much resistance with trying to make things here at a competitive price point. But the more time goes on, and I see the more intricacies of companies that make things here and how it affects supply chains and people that their livelihoods depend on manufacturing jobs in the U.S. or engineering jobs in the U.S. And especially with AI and stuff coming in, I think a lot of the jobs that are super common in the U.S. now are probably not going to be super common in 10 years. A lot of the information based, even idea based, maybe I won't have a job in 10 years and you'll just be able to ask an AI to come up with novel ideas for the space. And, that's kind of what I'm worried about is you have, because the power is going to be in the companies that already have the power, which are the companies that can afford to file IP as fast as possible. If you have an AI that you could essentially use as a supercharged engineer, and you come up with part of an idea, which is all you really need is to come up with a piece of it that the AI didn't. Um, you know, you could generate IP at a crazy rate versus people that are doing it manually with human engineers. Um, and then you could just file 2,000 patents a year or something like that. And you flood the market with so much IP that no matter what angle someone comes out with something, you have the ability to say, "Hey, you can't do that." And I think that's coming. I think that's coming faster than we think it is. So
Well, that said, wouldn't your advantage be the fact that you have such a leg up on actually being able to create stuff and also being able to create stuff with such incredible quality that I think people would want? Not that
y-
you want to go that route, but
yeah, I mean, right now the issue AI has is it's not good with novelty. Um, and I'm not an AI expert, but from my understanding, these machines are essentially compilers where they're taking data points and creating like a 3D matrix representation of these data points, and it's just a probability. So they're converting everything into tokens, little pieces of information, and then taking that piece of information and logging it, like compiling that data and then guessing based off of statistic data what's going to come next. You know, token per token, letter from letter. That's how they work. So they're really reliant on data that's already been created, at least right now. I think one thing that kind of throws a wrench in that though is I forget what the proof was, but there's been a recent mathematical proof that was generated by an AI that was totally new mathematics. Um, and that's now you're starting to get into capability where the question is it actual novelty or is it simulated novelty because it's just not a connection that humans were able to make. Um, but you get into the gray area of, well, isn't that really what everything is? Like, my dip attachment is a version of a Matador, which is a version of a standalone dip bar that had to be rack attached, and like you just have like this continuous. People get all hung up in who's innovating and who's not, and who's copying and who's doing this and who's doing that, and like it's 99.9% of everything that exists on the market is not new. Like it's not something that someone else couldn't have came up with. It comes down to who can take the idea as an idea or as a drawing or as a spit out from an AI, and who could bring it into reality either the fastest, the most efficient, the cheapest, or at the highest quality, and what combination of those things that you could put together to get an advantage over somebody else. But I think those advantages are going to really start blurring, and it's really just going to be. I think a lot of companies are going to go into like public perception. It's going to be who you want to support more so than um, you know what specific products you're looking for. Because I think just like you could produce a lot of IP with an AI, you could also skate a lot of IP with an AI by finding loopholes in the current IP and maybe cross-referencing it with a lot of different prior art that would take you years to comb through as a person that you could do in a few minutes. Um, you know, it, the the disadvantage of AI are going to turn into advantages and vice versa, and they're going to flip flop, and it's going to be the same battle, but it's going to be at a supercharged speed, and speed is going to be king, and the only way you have speed as a company is you have to have money. You have to have manpower. You have to have money to a company is nothing but energy. It's another plug in the wall. Um, so the companies that are already scaling now, Rogue, Rep, Titan, all the companies that have already built a sizable audience or whatever, um, they're going to be the same companies that you're looking at that that have the leverage in the market. And I think you're either going to see a lot of consolidation of smaller guys, either through collaboration or just traditional consolidation where companies buy smaller companies, um, because it's no longer going to be feasible for somebody like me to come up with an idea and scale it out of their basement to the point that someone large enough pays attention, and you know that stuff. I just see that stuff going away. I don't. And
Unless you went
as
into debt, like crazy debt, to do it.
right, and you're still just
Yeah,
fighting an uphill battle against
yeah,
people that don't have it. Like Rogue, they're a debt-free company, and they're privately owned.
yeah.
All this talk about, oh, they're beholden to shareholders. There's no shareholders. Bill owns the company. That's
I
it.
know.
There's no there's no one that he answers to. And he's already publicly said that he wouldn't sell to private equity. So, say what you want about a company, but companies get to that close to that $1 billion valuation, and private equity starts looking really good when they'll pay out double to 5x your company worth, because they know that they could either scale it or they could strip it. Um, and that's what they would do if Rogue sold to private equity tomorrow. They wouldn't keep making shit here. It would all be made in China in 6 months. It would be gutted. They'd gut everything in that company. They'd sell off all the machines, which I'm pretty sure they use primarily American-made machines. Um, they'd they'd gut all that, and a lot of it would be offshored, and the product would change, just like you see with anything else that happens to. Um, but that's so I'm looking at all that stuff and looking at the way AI is changing the landscape, looking at how my life's kind of unfolding right now and how important it is for me to kind of be present at home. Um, you know, medical things aside, I don't get a lot of time with my wife or my kids. You know, we have to essentially schedule any time that we want to have together. We gotta we gotta write it down, make a plan of how that's gonna happen. Um, and yeah, it's exhausting. I'm tired, to be honest with you. So, um, I wouldn't say that I'm totally burnt out. I still There's still a lot of stuff I want to do. Um, but if I keep going the way that I'm going, I just keep doing things the way that I'm doing them, and I just keep chasing my tail with lead times and making custom stuff and whatever, um, I'm never going to get anywhere. And then the whole AI revolution is going to come through, and going to miss the boat because they don't have any leverage on any of the markets or any ways to get ideas out there, because you're going to get scaled out of existence. At least with somebody like Rogue that already demonstrates they're capable of moving quickly, um, and getting things done, you know, which is a rarity anymore. People just don't put things into action like they used to. You know, I think that's the best way forward, is to, partner with people, make new connections, maybe connect other companies to them that make sense. Um, which isn't an invitation to send me messages and say, "Hey, can you send this to Bill?" Because I get that twice a week, and it's not going to happen. I'm not sending this guy text messages with your idea and telling him to get a hold of you. Like, that's not how that works. Um, so I think Donnie Thompson's had the same problem, where people have an idea and they think it's the best idea ever, and um, you know, having an idea is great. Everybody has ideas. I think having a really novel idea takes a certain skill set. Um, but everybody thinks their ideas are really novel and really different. And I'll get sent stuff, and they'll be like, "Hey, check this out," and um, which I don't really like doing, by the way. But um, I don't like people sending me ideas, because
And
there's a good
then
chance that I have an iteration of that idea already written down somewhere, and then it's, "Hey, you stole my idea." And, well, no, I didn't just take your idea and change it. I already had a way of going about this, and then you've thought about it too, because it makes sense. You know, that's where the ideas come from. Very few ideas or technologies pop up out of nowhere where they generate their own ecosystem. Um, it just doesn't happen that often. So a lot of things are based off of, here, like this thing. I tease this at home Gym Con. It's a adjustable grip tool.
mm-hmm.
As far as I know, no one's ever made anything like this. Um, you could adjust the span on it. It's essentially a pinch grip tool. So, you pinch it, hook it to a cable or to a weight horn or whatever, and then you could adjust, you know, move that in. Now you have a 2-inch block, and out here you have a 6-inch block or 6.5-inch block or whatever, and you could change where the pivot point is. Like, if you want to bias it to one side or bias it to the other, you just slide that back and forth. But pinch blocks already exist. Like, that idea didn't come out of a vacuum. It came from watching a Instagram video where I saw someone's home gym, and they had to build a whole rack of shelves to hold pinch blocks and blobs and all this other shit. Because if you're a grip trainer and you're doing grip competitions, or arm wrestling or whatever, you have hundreds of implements, So why not figure out ways to reduce that down a little bit and make them more multi-use, which is what these holes here probably won't stay holes like that because that makes it kind of inconvenient. But they are for adding attachments to, like if you want to simulate any kind of other grip surface. I could put UHMW on that thing to make it slippery. I could put a stall mat material on there if you want a rubber grip or whatever. We could do different profiles like blobs or hexes or whatever. Round pieces, because you could bias it to one plate. You don't have to grip two plates. You go to one plate and put a sphere on it. You could do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like I said, that doesn't come out of a vacuum. It's not totally novel. It's just a novel way of approaching it, which also isn't novel because there's tons of adjustable equipment out there. There's all kinds of equipment that solves a problem by making it adjustable. I think people go overboard with that. I think that's kind of the new fad right now, is that you make everything as adjustable as possible for the home gym market, because then, it applies to the most people possible. The issue I have with that is that you always lose something in translation when you make something overly adjustable. You either make it too complicated to use to where you have to have stickers and numbers and instructional videos and all that to use these things, or you introduce too much slop into an assembly, which is a problem here. You look at this thing and this moves, okay, and it moves because it has to, because if it doesn't, then this can't slide. So I have a new plastic piece that I machined for this that will take 90% of that out, but no matter what you do, it's going to move a little bit. You know, so just taking a piece of equipment and making it adjustable isn't anything new either. So there's just a lot of people fighting over what's novel, who's being innovative, who's not. Who should have protection, who shouldn't. All you could do is go through the steps everybody else is going through. You make the product. You could try to get IP on it, get your preliminary patent, and for a lot of people, unless you have that to me that's the number. Unless you have $100,000 in the bank, don't get a patent with the idea that you yourself are going to defend that patent, because it's not going to happen. And even if it's best case scenario, you get your preliminary, you get your patent relatively cheap, which is, I think the cheapest I've seen is like $5,000, unless you do everything yourself and then you really set yourself up for getting your patent invalidated by not using a lawyer. Because that's, patent attorneys, that's a really niche profession. You maybe don't have anybody copy you for a while. You get a copy, you send out a cease and desist, they back down because they're scared or whatever. Eventually someone's going to copy you, and you're going to send that cease and desist letter after already spending, let's say you spent $10,000 already getting that patent and all the money and development and whatever. Someone's going to copy you, and you're going to have to spend $50,000 to defend it. And then what happens when the next person comes up and copies you while that person's copying you and you're defending it? You got to sue someone else, or you got to hope that suing the first person gives you enough precedence to send the other person a letter and goes, hey, this is what happened to them. You want it to happen to you. Like, unless you have the resources to do that, you essentially have to get the protection and hope within that year that you have, you could offload it to a company that is capable of doing those things. So you're going to see small guys that actually want to protect their ideas, that don't just want to be copied out of oblivion like every other idea. Like, there's so many copies and so many iterations of everything. And consumers look at that, and I see this all the time. They look at it and they go, well, that's a good thing because we get more options. And then it's a race to the bottom on price because, when you have 20 options, most people are looking at either it's a quality and price slide index. Uh, does it do what I want it to do? Okay, well, I want it as cheap as possible and still does what I want it to do. That's most of the market. Um, the thing is that you disincentivize when that happens, you disincentivize companies that are looking to actually make money to be able to turn a business into something like Rogue that's capable of scaling things in the US or otherwise. You disincentivize that company of coming up with things, um, or anybody to grow a business, because you can't grow a business if you can't rely on a product, because we talked about how hard it is to make something go from concept to physical product. Well, if you're just copied into oblivion, you have to do that over and over and over and over again as fast as humanly possible, and just hope you could outrun the copiers that eventually are going to catch you. Eventually, they're going to run you down. They're going to copy everything that you make. So the only thing you have is the ability to protect the item, and that's what allows you to build a business over time. If you can't do that, you're never able to build the business unless you have some kind of hook, like you do a finish nobody else does, or you do a material no one else does, or whatever. And that only buys you so much time. um, I fortunately had a lot of people. I had no protection on the dip attachment. um, I had no way of getting protection on it, no way of defending it. There was never an idea to go, I'm going to go patent this thing. Literally laughed at people when they told me to do it, because I can't. It's like it's impossible. Um, so I was fortunate enough that when somebody came in and made a version of it, people stood up and went, we don't want this to happen this way. And you don't want it to happen that way because from my perspective, even looking at other makers, you see makers that are working out of their house or working a regular job or struggling or whatever. And everybody has that dream of having that idea that breaks them out of that mold that they've been stuck in their whole life. You know, guy that invents the ballpoint pen or something, and now all of a sudden you're a millionaire and you could do everything you ever wanted to do. But especially with AI coming up and everything else that happens in the market and what happens in China, like how many of those stories do you hear anymore? It just doesn't happen anymore because super novel ideas are few and far between. Um, we have the internet and we're able to do things like this where we talk to each other and we could share ideas, and that really sped up like what people are introduced to, because people that are idea people can look at something. I think what my skill set is that I could look at something that is totally unrelated to fitness equipment and apply it as a solution to something fitness related or gym related. Um, and those examples are just going away. Look at everything that's out on the market now. Um, you got so many options for everything, and yeah, that's great as a consumer. But like if you want that idea um, of people being able to make it, two things have to happen. You we well, I arguably for me, three things have to happen. Is you have to People have to be able to protect their ideas. Right now, that system is totally broken, and it's going to get way more broken as soon as large companies can use AI to fast track IP. The second they could do that, the system means nothing, like totally broken. So something has to be done there. I don't know what the solution is. I'm just bitching about it right now. Um, the the next thing that has to happen is, um, you know, you have the IP reform. You have to support that system of not tolerating copies for just the sake of something being cheaper, which is difficult because people don't make that much money. And why spend $400 on a dip attachment when you could buy, one, imported for $90 or whatever, and it does essentially the same thing. Um, I get where that idea comes from. I don't always buy things, that are from the original creator or whatever, um, or that are solely made in America. I know for the last few years, I've been looking for those things. I've been like, if I see a version of something come up, I try to do a little bit more homework of where that thing came from and where it's sourced from. Um, but for people to do that on a mass scale, I just don't see that happening unless there's some kind of incentive in making that happen. Um, and I think the incentive needs to be that you need to be able to empower people that have ideas and figure out ways for those people that have ideas but have no means of turning them into a physical product, and then distributing that product. You have to develop some kind of system that makes that easier. Um, Again, I don't know what that is. To me, right now, what that is I'm doing my best to create relationships, whether it's with me and another company or, you know, ultimately I have to look out for myself first because, you know, I'm trying to get my family out of here and into a house that's suitable, something that my wife can navigate, something that's easier to take care of, something with more room. We got dogs. I want them to be able to go in and out and run around, do whatever the hell they want to do. Um, you know, it so, you know, everybody's looking out for themselves first, obviously, but I've done things already that I haven't been public about that I've connected certain people to other people where they've been able to get ideas made that they otherwise couldn't. So I'm trying to do some things myself, but you know, that just needs to be encouraged more in the zeitgeist, in the space of all things creative and products and all that. There has to be some kind of incentive for these larger companies that have the capability of doing these things to approach guys like me or whoever. We got tons of makers in the space now. Um, and for me, that incentive was a lot of people, getting upset and saying that they weren't going to support a business that was going to, from the outside look like they were preying on someone smaller than they are. Um, and I like I said, I don't know what that solution is other than people just keep doing what they're doing and try to support creators and try to call out copies. And
Yeah.
that's an imperfect system. But what are you going to do? I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just give some personal unsolicited advice. Um, First of all, I think you have brought some items to the market, even though you say that everything's kind of built off of each other. You have definitely, truly brought some unique items to the market. I think there's still a lot of those products in your head. I think over the last, I don't know, how long has it been, like 7, 8 years, of
5.
5 years of you doing this. You've done it the right way. Um, I think you've sprinted those last 5 years, and you're probably, I think you're probably not as far along as you thought you were five, like you would be in 5 years of doing the amount of work that you did. But with that said, I think if you just keep plugging along, obviously you need to take some sort of breaks, especially during this time of turmoil. But I think if you just keep your head in it, I don't know exactly which one of your methods is going to work, but I think you're going to make it. I think maybe a little bit of overthinking on what AI is going to do, because like we don't know, and there's there's no use in like overthinking it. I don't think we
Oh no,
can
I
out
don't.
strategize it.
No, I don't. I don't sit here and I don't put a lot of thought into that. That's more like It's more like thinking about things, listening to podcasts, and like just kind
Yeah,
of
I mean, it's so
figuring
hard.
out what the next thing is going to be, just to try to running a business like steering a cruise ship.
Right.
You're trying to align yourself before you get there.
Yeah, but
Um,
anyways, what I was trying to get was I think, I think yeah, I think you're going to be all right if you just keep plugging along. And but you're also, I mean, you bring up some great points. Like what can we as an industry do better to get some of these great ideas into some of the more established hands that will ultimately help all. It wouldn't just help like the smaller creators; it would help the end users as well, because
mhm.
it's a better home gym product for those who have home gyms, which ultimately will attract more people into the home gym space. If the home gyms in general just keep getting better and better and better, there's already little excuse to not have a home gym, but the more appealing this industry can make it, the more it's going to help everybody. That's just the way I
Yeah,
think of it.
absolutely.
That's just the way I think about it. I still think it's young. I think a home gym just simply makes sense for just about everybody, as long as they have health on their radar. So I just wanted to say that, like, just stick with it. Um, yeah, yeah. It's unsolicited advice.
Oh
Just
no,
wanted to
I
chime
get
in.
what you're
Yeah,
saying, and I think anybody that's in the space or any other space, I think you have to be, yeah, the idea of coming up with an idea, and that is the bulk of your work. Um, that you came up with an idea, and then all of a sudden that idea makes you a ton of money. Those instances are so few and far between, regardless of how great your idea is.
yeah,
Um, you know, Especially in physical products, that's a big issue. And stuff like software, especially now where you could generate it a little easier. Maybe that's more realistic dream, but the idea doesn't get you there. You got to be willing to take a beating for a long time, and
yeah,
probably longer than you think you do. And um, the more connections that you make, and that's another reason why I, you know, other than just trying to be a decent person, is I my philosophy is have as little enemies as possible. Um, some of these companies, new companies come out, and you know, they they want to say fuck you to everybody, and I'll just do what I want, and if you don't have protection on it, I'm gonna copy your idea, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's some people that have that approach right now, and that's fine. I mean, you might be able to scale a manufacturing company, and um, you know take advantage of the race to the bottom or whatever that way. Um, but you're going to make a lot of enemies along the way. You're going to piss a lot of people off, um, and it just doesn't serve you in the long run. There's been so many times that I've been in a jam or needed somebody's help, or vice versa, and it's somebody that maybe I haven't talked to in a couple years, but maybe it was even born out of a customer issue, and just the way that it got resolved was enough for someone to go up the bat for you or whatever, um, or helping somebody out with something little that, and then they're in a different position at some point to where they're able to help you more than you help them, or um, vice versa. I think that should be incentive enough just to try to be a decent person in these spaces, and you know, not. And I think that's where Rogue has an issue, is that they're kind of a black box. You know, they like to be private because you have to be. Like, when you're that big, you're a target you're a target from everywhere. Um, so you, it's easy to kind of close yourself up, and make it a black box so no one can look in. Um, but that creates a certain type of optic, that I think is frowned upon now because of, especially coming out of like the pandemic and stuff. You had this huge transfer of wealth, and all of these companies that basically did whatever the hell they wanted, while small companies got pushed under and individuals got pushed under and people lost their jobs. And I think that's scary to people. So, it generates that optic that doesn't look so good. But yeah, no, I agree with you that you just have to keep going with it. And I'm hoping that I make enough right decisions that it pushes me in the right direction, that isn't just good for me but and my family, but is potentially good for the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
It's why I try to make an effort to go to things like Home Gym Con, where everybody kind of is, a lot of people. I think in our industry, I think it's more than a lot of other industries, where you go to a space like that, and yeah, there's certain cutthroat relationships between certain companies, but as far as like the small guys, small to medium guys, people were helping us set up, and we were helping people carry stuff out, and everybody kind of had a certain way of going about things that wasn't like it's me versus you. It's we're kind of all part of this space and contributing to it, and you know we should try to help each other where we can. Um, I think that could also go too far, where people think that everybody kind of has to do that, and we've got to join hands and sing "Kumbaya" and we're all friends, because I that's not true either. You know, there's companies in this space I absolutely will not work with, and I won't talk to, because of things that I've either witnessed them do, or things that they've done to me, or vice versa. Um, you know, I try not to do anything ill will to anybody, and but maybe I've done something or released a product that is is pissed someone off. I don't know, but so right now, yeah, I am going to keep going. I don't have no plans on exiting the company or doing anything like that, which is one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you. Because I think some people are going to have that idea, because of it's just going to look like that. Um, I'm still working in the background, regardless of how busy I am with family or whatever. Every day I'm putting something into it. Um, I'll show you something that I just got protection on.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
that is for that arc system. So you're the first one to see this in any kind of public setting.
Okay.
Um, Again, I don't think it's going to blow anybody's minds, but I think it's going to be useful, especially with the arc system and expanding it. So what I have here is a handle. This would typically be knurled, but I
Okay.
mean, you could probably see what's going on here.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
so we have something that can plug into the arc. One of the big issues, though, you have a handle that spins. This, especially something that spins as freely as this does, rides on bushings. This is just a 3D printed uh, nut on the end of it, kind of. It's a retainer, but this also functions to turn that inner barrel, which is the threads, this piece here. So, the problem is that as soon as you do this and you have a male thread that goes into a female thread, and you can't tighten it in, this piece on the back here allows you to take that into, you have the arc here, take that in, and now this is what allows you to thread it into that frame.
Hmm.
And so you have that's as tight as I could get it in the arc. This stays free spinning. So now you
Ah.
could have the 5-degree arc or whatever. And with the V1, you could just take the regular handle, throw a couple roller washers on each side, and you could get something that kind of works.
Mm-hmm.
Not nearly as smooth as this, but this solves the problem of using it for a lot of other stuff like curls or tricep pushdowns or whatever you would want for a rotating handle.
Interesting. And you can do that
But
on all of the sizes?
so right now that the prototype is inch and a half thick, um, somewhere around like 38 millimeter or whatever, 40 millimeter, um, because you have to have that inside barrel, which on the prototype is solid. Um, and then you have to have space for the bushings on the outside sleeve. Um, so it's kind of dependent on what bushings we could source. I might just end up making custom ones to do thinner handles. Um, Maybe do some special machining to offer, the as thin as a 28 millimeter handle. I don't know if that's possible yet or not. So it's gonna also depend on how much weight it could take and
Yeah.
just how strong it is in construction. But you can vary the outside thickness just with changing the bushings and the outside tube. So, but I want to do that. That's going to be available in, well, this is my problem. What we just talked about is that it's difficult to bring things from concept to reality. I have a prototype here, but that's not the hard work. It wasn't easy to get it to this step, but right now it's made from stainless, so it's heavy. Um, Ideally, it should be made out of aluminum, would be the correct material, or a hybrid where the inside core is aluminum and maybe the outside is stainless. Either way, it should be partly aluminum to reduce weight. Um, Issue with aluminum is you have to anodize aluminum or you have to coat it in something because if you don't, aluminum eventually corrodes. Um, so I'm working on that now to be able to try to offer them myself. I don't know if I can. I'm really hoping, um, maybe if you see this and you want that thing, you know, tell Rogue you want it because they're going to be the best person to make that thing. I think it integrates into the ARC system really well, the way that it's designed. I don't know if they're going to change anything, whatever, but um, to be able to do some different lengths of that and offer it with the different versions of the ARC and some of the other ARC products that I already have planned, that really expands the usability of that system. So, if you want them to do it, let them know that you want them to do it. And until then, I'm going to keep trying to move it forward as much as I can. I'm working on figuring out coatings right now for things because I think going solid stainless, it works fine, but you're back at the same problem where a 12-inch handle is 9 pounds, so the smaller handles won't be as bad, which is what most people are probably going to use. The 5 to 8 inch handle is probably what's going to be more common. But I want to do them out to the 12-inch. So doing them in aluminum, they would only be a couple pounds a piece and make a lot more sense. So, um, that's all that new I have to show you. I mean, I'm working on other stuff too, but time is an issue. Money's an issue.
Cool.
But
Yeah.
um, that's pretty much all I got for you right now.
No,
So
that was great. I don't have much more to add. Thanks for giving us an update. Giving us just it's. I mean, it really is cool to see behind the scenes someone making this type of stuff, and I hope that people do listen to this and understand that you're working your ass off, and to support those people that are really working hard, making cool stuff. And again, just like building, making the home gym scene better. You're doing that. And I know you can't, like, there's a lot of you guys, and not everybody can support everyone, but I think if you have the opportunity, just consider purchasing from someone like Chris, because like I said, he's he's put it all on the line. Not that other companies haven't, but he's doing it all on the line, making amazing stuff. And yeah, again,
appreciate it.
really cool to hear your just the background of what's going on. And Wish your son the best of luck during surgery, and hope you guys stay strong and that you're able to get through it.
Thanks, fam. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it.
It's good
Well,
talking to you.
good talk. We'll end this.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, man.